we're very excited to be here. I'm Laurie Handlers.
I'm Michael Gibson.
And we are extraordinary
Extraordinary
lovers. And why are we
Because
extraordinary
we go
lovers?
all over the world teaching people how to move their relationships from the ordinary to the extraordinary.
Yes, we do. And
Yeah.
we teach retreats on it. We've done online courses on it, and we have taught weekend versions of it. We believe in extraordinary love. And why? Because we think couples are an endangered species. So we know that you who are participating in this summit are single people, primarily over 40. And so we know that if you're participating in this summit, that you'd like to have a partner. Look, we learned algebra and geometry in junior high school and high school, but we never learned how to love.
Right.
We didn't learn how to communicate love to somebody important to us. So mostly all of us learned it by trial and error. And Michael and I have done something about it. We put together material that would have people really learn how to be extraordinary at being in love. And it involves a whole bunch of stuff like self-love, love of the other, and love that manifests. And today we're going to talk about one of the key pieces.
Boundaries.
Boundaries.
Boundaries can actually heat up your intimacy.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah.
So first of all, we want to tell you what boundaries are. Boundaries are like membranes around cells. Like if you think of an amoeba, or if you think of a blood cell, or you think of however you want to think of a single cell thing, that has a permeable membrane around it. And that permeable membrane, permeable, I'm saying that because we're going to bring that up after, that boundaries are permeable. They're not like brick walls. Permeable means that they keep out, let's talk about an amoeba. They keep out toxins, but they allow in nutrients. So our boundaries also keep out toxins and they allow in nutrients. People and things that are good for us, experiences that are good for us, our boundaries let in. People and things that we shouldn't go there, our boundaries keep out.
Right.
But they're permeable because boundaries are only needed until they're not.
That's right.
But I'm
We'll
getting
talk about
ahead
that in a
of,
minute.
yeah, I'm getting ahead of us. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
So the important thing to note about boundaries is oftentimes we don't necessarily know all of our boundaries up front, and we encounter them when they get crossed. And so what there is to know about your boundaries really is, you already have a list of them, I'm sure. If I were to rattle off a few things like don't be rude to me, sarcasm, right? Don't make fun of me, or don't eat my yogurt in the fridge. I bought that yogurt for me, or whatever, right? Those are boundaries. And so when a boundary gets crossed that you didn't know about, there's a visceral reaction in your body. And so typically it's in the chest area or the stomach maybe, but you feel like this contraction. And knowing that, you can identify, oh, a boundary just get crossed. And then you can go and you can research yourself, find out what it is about that boundary, what happened, like how did the boundary get crossed, so that you can actually communicate your boundaries. And that's the first key to being able to have boundaries, create intimacy in your life, is that you've got to be able to communicate them.
So how do you do that? You say to somebody, I have a boundary. You crossed it, and I need to tell you what it is. And I don't want this to happen with us again. Or if it does happen again, I'm going to tell you I have a boundary. You have to state your boundary and let somebody know what it is. And in our relating, Michael was the first person to state a boundary to me. And I didn't understand all of his boundaries, but I said okay to them. So let's give an example of a boundary that you said. I'll never forget. We were getting ready to be intimate for the first time. We were going to have sex. Ooh. And he said to me ahead of time, if we have sex, you can't stay over my place and I'm not going to stay over yours. And I went, what? Yeah. I never heard that boundary before. No one's ever given me a boundary like that before. It was like astounding. I went, okay, like whatever. I thought it was weird.
Yep.
But I said, okay, whatever.
During that time, what was really important to me was my sleep. And I told her that. I said, look, I need my sleep. And so if I'm up all night long, or if I sleep with someone in the bed, or if they're like, I
Yeah.
don't have any pets, if there was an animal sleeping on my bed with, I can't sleep. And so I told her, I said, I need my sleep. And so I need to sleep alone. And she got it. And she was like, okay, no problem. She never fought me on it. She never tried to coerce me to stay, or to, to try to stay at my place after we'd had sex. And she honored that boundary, which was really important.
So honoring, so the next point is first, the
Mhm.
first point was
Communicate.
how do you know if you have a boundary? Then when you have a boundary and you know it, you need to communicate it.
Mhm.
Sometimes we don't know, but in our world, which is I'll define as sacred sexuality, a maybe or a not sure boundary is a no until the person knows.
That's right.
So maybe you've never heard that before, but maybe doesn't cut it. So he said the boundary. I didn't try to manipulate him off the boundary. I mean, how many of you have been manipulated out of your boundaries? Somebody tried to convince you, hey, come on.
Right.
What does that mean? Let's do it anyway. I'm not like that. So I didn't do that with him. And so how our relationship heated up is, first of all, trust. Like, we started to build intimacy because he gave me boundaries that I could honor whether I understood them or not. And then when he told me what they meant, I could definitely honor them. And so he started to really trust me.
Mhm.
And then at some point he said, hey, I'd really like to stay over tonight. And I just about lost it. I almost fell off my chair. I'm like, what? The guy who doesn't want to stay in the same bed. What do you mean you want to stay over? He said, I trust you. You didn't try to manipulate me off my boundaries.
That's right.
And so that started another phase of us becoming more intimate and more trusting with each other.
Now, this is so important to highlight here, because what Lori said earlier on, which was that boundaries are necessary until they're not, and how they become less necessary is it's connected to honoring boundaries. So we've all been there, right? There's a person in our life who crosses those boundaries all the time, and over time the trust for that person goes way down, and it's almost like as if it's a pendulum. On one side of this marker, you've got someone who you can't trust. You've got barriers up. You don't even want to be around that person. No intimacy. Your boundaries are constantly being transgressed. Well, on the other side of that, when someone is trustworthy and they honor your boundaries, intimacy is it actually arises naturally because of that.
It does.
So I had, at one point, because she had never ever tried, like, please just stay, she wasn't coercive at all. I said to her, hey, would it be okay? And that's the deepening of our intimacy because of boundaries.
So boundaries are so crucial and critical, and they're really important early on in relating, like very early on. Now, I know that a lot of people do not disclose who they are right away. They meet someone and they have such a people-pleasing personality, or what they call codependent personality, or whatever. I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to label all these people. But if you're just trying to be liked, like you want to look good and then you're trying to please the person, you're not going to say anything controversial, that's a mistake. That is a huge mistake. The way I feel about it is, I know Michael feels this way too.
Yeah.
The way we feel about it is, you should state these things early and often. Now, I used to say long ago, in a different time in my life, to people, when you first start dating someone, say no early on. They ask you, you want to go out? No. Do you want to go to the movies? No. Do you want to go bowling? No. Like, just say no sometimes. Why? You both survived no. And no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain yourself. You just go, no, I don't. That's not what I want to do. And just to survive no and find out that you survived no builds intimacy.
That's right.
It does.
Yeah, definitely.
If you meet someone and you're so busy trying to get them to like you and you don't risk anything about yourself, like certain values that you hold or certain boundaries that you have, you don't actually know who they are because they don't have anything to like bounce off of. And they don't actually know who
Yeah.
you are because you haven't given them, you haven't risked anything. And if you don't risk anything and you both don't know who each other are, it takes forever to actually get the true self.
Mm.
The way I look at it is if I could lose you, I want to lose you now.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait for months and years to find out who you really are, what your true colors are. And I don't want you to have to wait that about me. So thank you, Michael. Thank
Mm.
you for having really clear boundaries and stating them. And then I got to state my boundaries. So we're going to give you some examples of boundaries.
Yeah.
I have a boundary about coming on time. So we had that out pretty early on.
Mhm.
You're not coming on time to me, actually, you're making me wait, and sometimes you don't even show up. Not okay.
Yeah, canceling at the last minute.
Yeah, not okay with me. And guess
Not
what? He
okay.
doesn't do that anymore.
Mhm.
Never hasn't done it since.
Yep.
Like I just said, we got to have an integrity talk. I got a boundary. And by the way, whose responsibility is boundary?
Mm.
It's mine. Even if I tell him it's not his to uphold mine, and his aren't mine to uphold. If the thing happens again, it's on me to uphold the boundaries. So we had a few latenesses and we had a few broken plans, and then I had to say it. I actually only had to say it one time
Mhm.
because he got it the first time. But not everyone gets it the first time, especially your family. They're not going to definitely get it the first time. They may not get it the 10th time, but you have to still do it. They won't enforce your boundaries. They don't go to people and go, hey, I thought I told you I had a boundary. How come you're crossing it? No, you've got to say what your boundary is multiple times until they get it. And if they don't get it, you have choices to make about whether you
Yeah.
want to be intimate with these people. For me, if someone comes late 2 times, I give them a fair warning for the third time. I say, the next time you're late, I didn't have to do this with Michael, but I have done this with friends
Mm.
and family. The next time you're late, I will not make a plan with you again.
Right.
And then they get a choice. And if they're late again, guess what?
Yep.
The consequences have been laid out. I give the consequences and I enforce them.
That's right.
Some of my friends had to learn the hard way, and they had to slowly work their way back into my life.
What's great about what you just said is that you are someone who is very easy to interact with. And because I know your boundaries, like I know what it is that what your expectations are. You're not hiding out. You're not trying to, placate me in any way.
No,
You're solid. And that makes such a huge difference in the way that we relate. But it's also, it gives so much safety and trust and feeling like, wow, I know who I'm dealing with. There's no hidden agendas.
that's what we're advocating.
Right. So being someone who actually can communicate your boundaries, hold your boundary, and if need, provide consequences when boundaries get crossed, that's someone who's very solid and very, very easy to get along with. It may not be easy to hear, oh crap, you crossed my boundary, and here's what you need to know about me. That may not be an easy thing to say, nor may it be an easy thing to hear, but it's necessary. Then going on to that, because we've all crossed boundaries, we've all had our boundaries crossed.
Oh, yes.
How do you deal with that when you're dealing with the person who's your lover, or you're now in a relationship with them? Well, this is going to seem a little elementary, but you got to be able to ask for forgiveness and to forgive. Like, I am so sorry I crossed that boundary. I know what it means to you, and I am so sorry. Will you forgive me? I will do better. And this is going to be something that's a point of taking my attention, letting them know that you are sorry that you crossed their boundary. And sometimes you feel like you haven't. Well, if they're telling you you did,
And you defend?
and you defend against it, I didn't
Wrong.
do that. I didn't do that. Well, you're going to have to grow up a little bit, because I'll tell you something. You can either be in love or you can be right. And
Yeah.
being right There's nothing extraordinary about fighting. There's nothing extraordinary about being right, but there's something very extraordinary about saying to a person, I got it. I got it. I'm so sorry. I crossed your boundary and I love you and I'll do my best not to do it again.
Right. I'll do better. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to cause you dismay. I don't want to disappoint you.
Right.
I love you and I don't need to be right about something. What I need to be is in love with you.
Yeah. And
And
I want you to trust me.
And also when someone apologizes, a lot of people don't apologize. For a long time, I didn't never apologize because I was like, no, I meant it, you know. But if I really hurt somebody, I had to apologize. And the great thing about apologizing, even if on the inside you think you're right, like you think you didn't do it, when you apologize to someone, it relaxes their nervous system. You have to say what you're sorry for. We're not doing a lesson here on apology, but we need to include it because we said it.
Yeah.
You can't say, I'm sorry if. That's not an apology.
No.
I hate that. It's just like my stomach goes in a knot when I hear that.
Remove the word if.
I'm sorry that I crossed your boundary. It was an inadvertent mistake. I didn't mean it, but I'm so glad you told me about it because I wouldn't want you to hold on to it and like start building a big separation between us, which is what happens. So the apology itself relaxes the other person's nervous system. So if you cross a boundary, you need to apologize.
Yeah.
Michael, you're so right about that. And you're so good about that.
Thank you. Start from the very beginning, talking about your boundaries and what they are, and let people know who you are, because really, truly, boundaries really protect our values, and our values are really who we are, what we value, right? That's truly who we are. So boundaries have a function. They protect our values, and our values are who we are. And so if you can communicate who you are through your boundaries, let people know, give them the skinny before they run into one of your boundaries, let them know, I need you to be on time. If you give me your word, you need to keep it. Like, these are simple, but right, those are some things. Or, I don't sleep over. I actually told Lori, I said, I had a boundary. Don't try to have a relationship with me because I'm bad at relationships.
And I said, okay. I didn't know what he was talking about. I was like, okay, fine. But then he told me that he got diluted oftentimes in relationships. And I know you have too. Have I? Yes, we all have. Sometimes we're trying to please the other person so much we forget who we are and we go to become something that we're not. And then like when we break up, we have to like unravel that. Who is that person? Like a spool. Who did I become? And then we have to become ourselves again. And it's like a journey to come back to self. Don't lose yourself that way. Present who you say you are to somebody.
What's interesting, I was going to say this also, what's interesting is that when you're with someone who, you have this unspoken set of boundaries that gets broken, you're not speaking up for yourself, you're not really telling, and then at the end of the relationship, when you break up, all of a sudden your boundaries show up and now you start getting along with the person again. It's really interesting. It's common, but if only you could have just said, look, I've got all these boundaries without having to break up. These are boundaries that are important to me and you need to follow them, and I want to follow your boundaries as well. Now you have this mutual connection and you can deepen your intimacy.
Now, one other thing.
What's that?
That I forgot to say.
Yeah.
If you can't say no to me, I don't trust your yes.
Ding.
I feel like people who say yes all the time, someday I'm going to come out and my tires are going to be flattened or something because they needed to say no and they didn't. So they're going to like take it out on my car. I don't know. Anyway, this is a really important subject and we should have been taught this when we were in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And we weren't.
Absolutely.
All right. I feel complete. Do you?
Oh, yes.
So thanks for listening.
Yeah.
It's been our pleasure. I'm signing off. I'm Laurie Handlers.
Michael Gibson.